I caught my girlfriend talking to my history professor and got to know that she was pregnant with my child. I opted for a paternity test if she needed child support, but this happened. I'm a 22-year-old guy from a well-off family, currently in my third year of college. Growing up, I had everything I could ever want, but my parents always emphasized the importance of hard work and independence. They built their fortune from scratch, starting with a small tech startup in our garage that eventually grew into a successful company. Watching their journey taught me the value of perseverance and integrity. Despite our wealth, I've always tried to live a relatively normal life. In college, I chose to live in the dorms rather than getting my own apartment, wanting to experience the full college life. I've been working part-time at the campus library, not because I need the money, but because I want to build my own work ethic. It was during one of my shifts at the library that I first noticed Bree. She was a regular, always buried in her books, her long brown hair falling over her face as she studied. I'd seen her around campus before, but something about her intense focus and dedication intrigued me. One day, I finally worked up the courage to talk to her. I approached her table, pretending to reshelve some books nearby. "You must be going for a record," I joked, nodding at the stack of books beside her. She looked up, startled at first, but then smiled. That smile, it was like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. We started chatting, and I learned she was here on a scholarship, majoring in history. She told me about her dream of becoming a professor one day, her eyes lighting up as she spoke about her passion for the subject. From that day on, we started spending more time together. We'd study in the library, grab coffee between classes, and take long walks around campus. I found myself falling for her hard and fast. There was just something about Bree that made me feel alive. I learned more about her background. She grew up in a small town, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. Bree had worked her way through high school, balancing her studies with a part-time job to help her mom. Her determination to succeed despite the odds was inspiring. About a month after we met, I asked her out on an official date. I was a bundle of nerves, but she said yes with that beautiful smile of hers. I took her to my favorite Italian restaurant in town, a small, family-owned place I'd been going to since I was a kid. We talked for hours, sharing stories about our childhoods and our families. Bree told me more about growing up with her mom, about the sacrifices they both made to get her into college. I shared some of my own family history, including the pressure I sometimes felt to live up to my parents' success. As the weeks turned into months, Bree and I became inseparable. We were officially a couple, and I was happier than I'd ever been. I introduced her to my friends, and she fit right in. Everyone loved her bubbly personality and quick wit. I even brought her home to meet my parents during spring break. I was nervous about how they'd react, knowing how judgmental they could be sometimes. But to my surprise and relief, they welcomed Bree with open arms. My mom even pulled me aside to tell me how much she liked her, saying Bree reminded her of herself when she was younger. Everything seemed perfect. Bree and I were talking about our future together, making plans for the summer and beyond. I thought I had found the one. But then, about 5 months into our relationship, something happened that shook my world. I was walking downtown one Saturday afternoon, planning to pick up a gift for Bree's upcoming birthday. I had been saving up from my library job to buy her a beautiful necklace I'd seen her admiring in a shop window a few weeks back. As I passed by a small cafe, I glanced inside and saw something that made me stop in my tracks. Sitting at a corner table were Bree and Mr. Johnson, our young, unmarried history professor. That itself wasn't too strange. Professors and students sometimes met outside of class. But what alarmed me was Bree's body language. She was hunched over, clearly crying, while Mr. Johnson had his hand on her shoulder, comforting her. I stood there for a moment, frozen, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to burst in and demand answers, but I held back. Instead, I waited outside until they left, making sure they didn't see me. That night, when Bree came over to my apartment, I asked her about what I'd seen. She seemed surprised at first, then explained that she'd had a panic attack while out running errands. She said Mr. Johnson happened to be at the cafe and noticed her distress, so he comforted her until she calmed down. I wanted to believe her, but something felt off. "Why were you alone at a cafe if you were running errands?" I asked. "And was it just a coincidence that Mr. Johnson was there?" Bree's face crumpled, and she started crying again. Without another word, she grabbed her bag and left my apartment. I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and worry. Bree wasn't returning my calls or texts. When I saw her in class, she avoided eye contact. I tried to focus on my studies, but my mind kept replaying that scene in the cafe. As the days passed, I started noticing things I hadn't before. Bree and Mr. Johnson seemed to have a lot of hushed conversations before and after our history class. Once, I saw them walking together on campus, deep in discussion. I didn't want to be the jealous, suspicious boyfriend, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The Bree I thought I knew wouldn't keep secrets from me. We'd always been open and honest with each other, or so I'd believed. After about a week of this, I decided I needed answers. I reached out to Bree's best friend, Emma, hoping she might have some insight into what was going on. Emma and I had become friends too over the past few months, often hanging out as a group with Bree. Emma agreed to meet me for coffee. When she arrived, I could tell something was wrong. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying. We sat down, and I gently asked her if she knew what was going on with Bree. Emma burst into tears. Between sobs, she told me something that turned my world upside down. Bree was pregnant, and she suspected Mr. Johnson was the father. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My mind was reeling, trying to process this information. How could this be happening? When had Bree and Mr. Johnson? How long had this been going on? I thanked Emma for her honesty and left the cafe in a daze. I needed to talk to Bree. I needed to hear the truth from her. I called Bree and asked her to meet me at my apartment. When she arrived, I could see the fear and guilt in her eyes. Before I could say anything, she blurted out, "I'm pregnant." I nodded, telling her I already knew. Then I asked the question that was burning in my mind. "Is it Mr. Johnson's?" Bree's eyes widened in shock. "What? No!" she exclaimed. "It's yours. I've been talking to Mr. Johnson because I needed advice. I was scared to tell you." I wanted to believe her, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure what to think. I told her I was hurt that she hadn't come to me first, if the baby was indeed mine. We were supposed to be partners, facing life's challenges together. Despite my confusion and pain, I told Bree that if the baby was mine, I was willing to step up. I said I would marry her and take on the responsibilities of fatherhood, but given the circumstances, I also said I wanted a paternity test. Bree's reaction to this was strange. She seemed hesitant, almost reluctant. This only fueled my suspicions further. I'm writing this post because I don't know what to do. I love Bree, or at least I thought I did. But now I feel like I don't really know her at all. Am I wrong for wanting a paternity test? Should I believe her explanation about Mr. Johnson? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. Thank you all for your support and advice on my original post. The past few weeks have been an emotional roller coaster, and I'm grateful for this community's guidance. After my conversation with Bree, I knew I needed more information. The next day, I decided to talk to Mr. Johnson directly. I've always respected him as a professor. He's young, probably in his early 30s, and has a way of making history come alive in his lectures. I've taken several of his classes over the past couple of years, and he's always been professional and approachable. I caught him after class and asked if we could speak privately. We went to his office, a small room cluttered with books and historical artifacts. I'll never forget the look on his face when I told him what Bree had said, that she was pregnant with my child, but had been seeking his advice. Mr. Johnson's expression was a mix of surprise and, was that relief? Then he said something that knocked the wind out of me. "If Bree told you the child is yours, then I'm afraid she hasn't been honest with you." I stood there, stunned. Mr. Johnson went on to explain that Bree had come to him a few weeks ago, claiming she was pregnant with his child. He said he had been trying to help her figure out her options, but he was certain they had never been intimate. My head was spinning. I told Mr. Johnson about my plan to get a paternity test, and he nodded, saying it was probably for the best. Before I left his office, he apologized for not coming to me sooner, saying he had been trying to protect Bree's privacy while also figuring out the truth himself. I left the campus in a daze, trying to process everything. Bree had lied to me, she had lied to Mr. Johnson. But why? What was really going on? I called Bree and asked her to meet me at my apartment. When she arrived, I could see the fear in her eyes. She must have known something was up. I told her everything Mr. Johnson had said. Bree broke down, sobbing and shaking. She kept saying she was sorry, but she wouldn't explain what was really going on. I tried to stay calm, even though I was hurt and angry. I told Bree that if she wanted any support from me, emotional or financial, she needed to agree to a paternity test. She was reluctant at first, but when I stood firm, she finally agreed. The next few days were tense. Bree and I barely spoke as we waited for the results. I threw myself into my studies, trying to distract myself from the chaos my life had become. I couldn't help but think back to the beginning of our relationship. Had it all been a lie? I remembered how Bree had told me about her struggles growing up, how hard she and her mom had worked to get her into college. I had admired her so much for that. Now, I wondered if even those stories were true. I also thought about my own family. I hadn't told my parents what was going on yet. They had liked Bree so much when they met her. How would they react to all of this? My friends tried to be supportive, but I could tell they were shocked too. They had all thought Bree was great. Emma, Bree's best friend, was especially upset. She felt guilty for telling me about the pregnancy, but I assured her she had done the right thing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the results of the paternity test came back. I wasn't the father. I called Bree and asked her to come over. When she arrived, I showed her the results. She broke down again, crying harder than I'd ever seen before. Through her tears, Bree finally told me the truth. The baby wasn't mine. It wasn't Mr. Johnson's either. It was her ex-boyfriend's, a guy she'd been with just before starting college. He had disappeared after she told him she was pregnant. I sat there, trying to process this new information. Part of me was relieved that I wasn't going to be a father at 22, but a bigger part of me was hurt and angry. Bree had lied to me for months. She had used me, used Mr. Johnson, all in some misguided attempt to find support for her baby. I asked her why she hadn't just told me the truth from the beginning. She said she was scared and didn't know what to do. She thought if she could convince me the baby was mine, I would support her. When that didn't work, she tried the same thing with Mr. Johnson. I told Bree I needed time to think. I asked her to leave and she did, still crying. Now I'm sitting here, trying to figure out what to do next. I don't think I can forgive Bree for her lies, but I also know she's in a difficult situation. Part of me wants to help her, but another part feels like I've already been manipulated enough. I'm not sure what my next steps should be. Should I tell the university about what happened with Mr. Johnson? Should I try to help Bree find support elsewhere? Or should I just walk away from this whole mess? Any advice would be appreciated. I feel lost and betrayed, and I'm not sure how to move forward from here. Update 2. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and I wanted to share what's happened since then. After learning the truth about Bree's pregnancy, I took some time to myself to process everything. I didn't contact Bree, and she didn't reach out to me either. I focused on my studies and spent time with my friends, trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy. But the situation with Bree and Mr. Johnson was still weighing on me. I felt like I couldn't just let it go, especially since Mr. Johnson had been dragged into this mess too. After careful consideration, I decided to report the incident to the university's ethics committee. I met with the committee and told them everything that had happened. They took my statement seriously and assured me they would investigate the matter thoroughly. They also provided me with resources for counseling, which I'm considering. A few days after my meeting with the ethics committee, I received a call from Emma, Bree's best friend. She had more information about what had been going on with Bree. According to Emma, Bree had been struggling financially more than she let on. Her scholarship didn't cover all her expenses, and her part-time job wasn't enough to make ends meet. She had been looking for ways to secure her future. Emma revealed that Bree had initially gotten close to Mr. Johnson in hopes of improving her grades. She thought that if she could graduate with honors, it would open up more opportunities for her. When she found out she was pregnant, she saw it as a chance to secure financial support, first from Mr. Johnson and then from me when that didn't work out. I was stunned by this revelation. The Bree I thought I knew, the hard-working, honest girl I had fallen for, seemed like a complete stranger now. Emma also told me that Bree had left the university. The stress of the situation and her pregnancy had become too much for her to handle. She had moved back home with her mother to figure out her next steps. I thanked Emma for telling me all this. Even though it was painful to hear, I felt like I finally had the full picture of what had happened. In the weeks since then, I've been trying to move on with my life. I've thrown myself into my studies and started volunteering at a local community center to keep myself busy. My friends have been incredibly supportive, and I'm grateful for their presence in my life. I've also had some long talks with my parents. They were shocked and disappointed when I told them what happened, but they've been there for me every step of the way. My dad, in particular, has been a great source of support. He shared with me a story from his own college days about a relationship that ended badly and how he learned from it. His words have helped me put things in perspective. As for Bree, I haven't heard from her since the day I showed her the paternity test results. Part of me is curious about how she's doing, but I know it's best for both of us if we don't have any contact. The university's ethics committee concluded their investigation. They found that while Mr. Johnson hadn't done anything explicitly wrong, they recommended he undergo additional training on maintaining professional boundaries with students. I'm glad the situation was taken seriously, even if the outcome wasn't as dramatic as it might have been. I'm still processing everything that happened, and I know it will take time to fully heal from this experience. But I'm taking it one day at a time, focusing on my own growth and future. This whole ordeal has taught me some hard lessons about trust and honesty in relationships. While it's been a painful experience, I'm trying to use it as an opportunity for personal growth. I'm more cautious now, but I'm trying not to let this situation make me cynical about love or relationships in general. I've started keeping a journal, writing down my thoughts and feelings as I work through this. It's been surprisingly helpful, allowing me to see patterns in my emotions and thoughts that I might not have noticed otherwise. I've also been spending more time with my roommate, Alex. He's been a great friend through all of this, always ready to listen when I need to talk, or to drag me out for a game of basketball when I need a distraction. His support has meant more to me than he probably realizes. As for my future, I'm trying to stay focused on my goals. I'm still on track to graduate next year, and I've started looking into internship opportunities for the summer. I'm considering applying for a position at a local museum, which would be a great way to gain some experience in my field of study. I've also been thinking a lot about what I want in a relationship moving forward. The experience with Bree has made me realize the importance of open communication and honesty. I know I'm not ready to start dating again just yet, but when I am, I'll be looking for someone who shares these values. My parents have been incredibly understanding throughout this whole ordeal. They've offered to help me see a therapist if I feel I need it, which I'm considering. For now, though, I'm finding that talking things through with my friends and focusing on my studies is helping me cope. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support throughout this difficult time. Your words have been a source of comfort and guidance. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm hopeful that brighter days are ahead. As I move forward, I'm trying to take the lessons I've learned from this experience and use them to become a better person. I know it won't be easy, and there will probably be days when the pain and anger resurface. But I'm committed to growing from this, rather than letting it define me. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm focusing on my studies, spending time with friends, and trying to rediscover the things that make me happy. It's a process, but I'm slowly starting to feel like myself again.